forward. Once all the other guests will be joining periodically, so we can continue that. So today's webinar is about startups and the legal challenges they face in Pakistan. I would like to first introduce the guests to each other. I know you guys are probably acquainted with one another, but just to start off, we have on the panel, we have Barrister Ahmed. He's the founding partner at AUC Law, and he has worked in, he's the leading voice in startup, tech, and venture capital law in Pakistan. So he's also advised SCCP on reforms, and he's the forefront of Pakistan's startup ecosystem. Then we have Barrister Taimur Malik. He's the senior partner at Kilam Law. He's an Oxford graduate and founder of Quoting the Law. He specializes in corporate M&A and regulatory matters. Aside from that, he has a global experience and brings unique to business and legal strategy. Then we have Mr. Mian Sami-Ud-Din, who partnered at BNR Law, which is a top-tier dispute resolution expert with extensive experience in international arbitration and regulatory law. Mr. Sami is a key drafter. Two guests that we have on board, which will be periodically joining us, hopefully, is Mr. Junaid Riaz, who's a representative from Nakui & Co. And he's an emerging legal professional with strong command in tax, corporate, and commercial litigation. He brings practical insights from his work at one of Pakistan's leading law firms. And then finally, we have Mr. Rai Muhammad Saleh Azam, partner at Azam and Rai. So he advises on investment, climate, and regulatory framework in almost all major investment sectors of Pakistan. So moving forward with the webinar, I would just like to say that this will be divided into segments for everyone's ease, and we'll be structuring this accordingly. So we'll have regulatory compliances, then we'll talk about labor laws and their remote work and economy in Pakistan. Then we have investment and funding, and finally, future of startup law and precautionary measures. So moving forward, I would like to direct this question towards Uzair and Taimur. What do you think are the biggest regulatory hurdles for startups in Pakistan?
Ahmed, if you want to start, please. आपका नाम पहले लिया है.
No problem. So I'll divide this into two parts initially, I think. One is clarity around compliance obligations. That's more of an education thing. A lot of the startups are not able to engage attorneys or tax advisors, etc. And having the legal regime or the compliance regime in Pakistan, it's still quite opaque. We still have these professionals guarding a lot of the information, and not having that freely available is a challenge. The second is, of course, the sheer volume of compliances that are required. I know we have discussed this, me and Taimur, at least in the past, around simplifying the compliance obligation framework for a typical company, whether it's a startup or a traditional business, but having that very clearly spelled out at one place is paramount. Currently, we have over 25 departments that would typically be relevant to a tech company, and obviously it depends on the nature of activity that they're doing. But if you are, for example, exporting your services and receiving funds from abroad, then it adds a further layer of complexity. If you're selling services in Pakistan across different provinces, then there is another layer of complexity with respect to taxation in different provinces. So I just feel that there is a lot of complexity and opacity that currently exists. Broadly, I would divide that into these two parts.
I would also just add कि सिर्फ ये नहीं है, और ये स्टार्टअप्स के साथ सिर्फ नहीं है. पाकिस्तान में जितने बिजनेसेस हैं, जो भी एक कॉर्पोरेट एनवायरनमेंट में काम करना चाह रहे हैं, एक स्ट्रक्चर्ड तरीके से रजिस्टर होकर अथॉरिटीज़ के साथ, उनको ये चैलेंजेस फेस करने पड़ते हैं. और हम पहले तो ये डिफाइन कर लें कि स्टार्टअप्स भी इट्स अ रादर ब्रॉड टर्म। पाकिस्तान में $100 million वैल्यूएशन वाली कंपनी भी कई दफ़ा वो बिकॉज दे आर वीसी फंडेड तो स्टार्टअप के ज़ुमरे में आ रही होती हैं। और बिल्कुल एक जो छोटा सा बिजनेस एक एसएमई है वो भी कई लिहाज से एक स्टार्टअप है। सो आई थिंक हम ये डिफाइन ज़रूर करें कि जब हम स्टार्टअप की बात कर रहे हैं आपके इस प्रोग्राम पे और जो लोग सुन रहे हैं कि स्टार्टअप सिर्फ वो नहीं है जो कि एक टेक्नोलॉजी बेस्ड एक कुछ लोगों ने किसी इंक्यूबेशन सेंटर्स में बेस्ड एक कंपनी शुरू की है और उसके लिए एंजल फंडिंग और फिर वीसी फंडिंग के लिए वो कोशिश कर रहे हैं। सिर्फ वो स्टार्टअप नहीं है। स्टार्टअप वो कोई भी बिजनेस हो सकता है जो कि अपने एक अर्ली स्टेज पे है, उसको ग्रोथ कैपिटल चाहिए, उनके पास एक अच्छा इनोवेटिव आइडिया है और उसमें ऑब्वियसली अगर टेक्नोलॉजी शामिल है तो इट विल बी अ टेक्नोलॉजी स्टार्टअप। एंड देयरफॉर आई वुड से जो हम डिस्कशन इस वक्त कर रहे हैं और जो अहमद ने भी बातें की और आई एम श्योर के मियां समीउद्दीन भी करेंगे, ये पाकिस्तान के बड़े बिजनेसेस को छोड़कर बाकी मेजॉरिटी बिजनेसेस को अप्लाई करेंगी। सिर्फ जो प्योरली स्टार्टअप फोकस्ड हैं इन द सेंस ऑफ हाउ दे रेज फंड्स, हाउ दे आर ऑपरेटेड, हाउ दे मैनेज देयर इन्वेस्टर एंड फाउंडर्स कैप टेबल, वो डिफरेंसेस बिल्कुल हैं और उनके ऊपर हम आई एम श्योर आगे बात करेंगे।
So I would also like to talk about new laws that are being that have come up, like SCCP brings up a lot of let's say incubation centers, and then there's government-led incubation centers as well. Then there's the sandbox regulations as well from SCCP. Then we have the Digital Nation Pakistan Act 2025, and then we also have the Pakistan Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority formed in 2025. So what is your opinion on this? Sami-Ud-Din, I would like to also hear what you have to say, since there's a lot of uncertainty in regards to how digital assets, token offerings, and NFTs, etc., will be treated under law, especially considering the fact that many of the startups are thinking of venturing into the
Is this their internet or mine?
No, it's theirs. It's
It's
theirs.
theirs.
Okay. I think we got the gist, so maybe you can answer. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the question. I think just taking a step back and talking about Ahmed, what you and Taimur spoke about, just briefly about regulatory challenges and how these don't just apply to what are conventionally thought of as startups, but all businesses. I mean, the fundamental factor really is, having legal certainty in our legal system. Investors, founders, entrepreneurs need to know when they, either make an investment or they venture into a new area or set up a business, how they'll be legally treated. And currently, Pakistan's sort of regulatory landscape is such that there's a lot of uncertainty. That's at least some, what I've seen in my experience and what I hear from others, such as yourself. When it comes to sort of new areas which Maha was talking about, blockchain and digital assets, yes, we have the Pakistan Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, very swiftly established through an ordinance. It's not exactly, clear, what will be involved in the licensing of those who want to venture into this area. But for me, I think historically, Pakistan has always suffered from an overly bloated regulatory landscape. And I think the Pakistan, or Pivara as it's called, will also suffer from the same. I would have thought that, maybe a merging of the SECP and the state bank into a larger financial services authority, leaving state banks other sort of role with regard to monetary policy and all. and then allowing that authority to also regulate virtual assets, or simply allow the SECP to do it, just as it does non-banking finance companies. But they've done that. Pakistan also has seen, a new Digital Nation Pakistan Act, which maybe you guys know what it's about, but I still haven't figured out what the utility of that law is, and the new commission under that, and the new authority under that. Yes, one can say that the government wants to, start digitalizing, the economy as much as possible. But it seems to me that without even enacting a Personal Data Protection Act, that which is the function, sort of the fundamental and the backbone of a digital economy. So loads to talk about. Our host isn't here, so I'll just stop there.
I'm
Taimur
not
bhai,
sure
I know you've been the host of many similar conversations. So as this is being telecasted as well, I can see we might as well continue the conversation till the top of the hour.
Yeah, I mean, I'd
Absolutely.
like to know any one of your views on the Pakistan Digital Nation Act, and obviously the Pivara Ordinance, which is obviously, the hot topic these days.
Have you seen the Pivara ordinance?
I have briefly, not very carefully.
It was not widely published, so it was. I don't know what was this. Why was there was such a secrecy around the text initially? It took about a few days for it to be shared. But for the either authority, I think there is a. I don't want to speak on behalf of the government, but I know again Taimur bhai has worked with the stakeholders from time to time, and so from what I've understood is they've siloed their approach into, if this is something that really needs to be done, the existing infrastructure is not going to be conducive for it to happen, and we need to just create new rails. So rather than fixing the system, there is always a desire to create a new path. In cases in court matters, we see the example of banking courts. Why do we have banking courts? Because there is an acceptance that the traditional court system is not going to be conducive enough for the banks to undertake recoveries the way that they want it to be done. And so for 25 years, and in fact more than that, we've had banking recovery laws specifically tailored and courts specifically for banks. You don't have that in developed judicial systems, right? And so the same I think the same applies in the case of WARA. There is in government of Punjab, they recently introduced this authority for enforcement of laws. I think so. There is a lot of authorities and bodies being created because there is sort of like a acknowledgement that the existing infrastructure is not going to allow those visionaries to do their job.
Thank you so much for jumping in. We just had some technical glitches, so thank you so much for our guests for stepping in. So I think regulatory compliances, we have established that they do need a lot of work, especially in terms for startups. But when we talk about startups, what we see is that a lot of them are now inclined towards freelancing. So that is where it all starts. So 10 or 5 years ago, the people who are on Fiverr are now the startup founders. So in those terms, both local and internationally, startups, the freelancers themselves, they have started hiring freelancers and remote workers. And so in that scenario, what do you think is the obligation in regards to tax, labor rights, and social security? Because for Pakistan, when you hire an employee here, you definitely have to pay their social security, you have to pay their EOBI, you also have to give them labor benefits. But vice versa, what is the scenario when you are doing this outside of Pakistan, or when outside companies are hiring in Pakistan? So what is your take on that? I would like to open the floor for anyone who would like to address this.
So I can perhaps comment on this. I have had some experience, and not from foreign sort of startups, but Pakistani startups, obviously with some corporate structure holding companies abroad, who have often preferred to hire and sort of employees or outsource their workforce to consultants based abroad. And that's the nature. It depends on the nature of the business, and this is common in technology startups, where you find software developers all over, and often they have preferred a model of consultancy, which does not bring in any employer obligations on board, particularly with the Social Security and EOBI obligations in Pakistan. And you've seen this in sort of ride-hailing companies. We've seen, recently Careem exit the market. Uber operated for a while and then stopped operating. My understanding is that one of the main issues with a lot of ride-hailing, and this is universal even in other countries, has always been this relationship, employer-employee relationship with those who used the platform to provide their services. So you have that issue with that model. But this ties in again to, I would say, to the regulatory landscape as well. And something that had just occurred to me when we were discussing is that in the technology industry, where you will find most startups, although Taimur's right, you'll find them in other areas as well. The way people are doing business is changing. The way businesses are structured is changing very, very fast. And our regulations are not adapting as quick enough, I'd say. So, let's take state bank regulations or foreign exchange regulations just as an example. The way state bank approvals work is that the foreign exchange manual sets out various, categories and examples if anyone wants to send money abroad or do anything
I think there have been recent changes in the foreign exchange manual as well, in that regards as well. So they have changed.
They're not so recent anymore. I mean, काफी अब साल हो गए, but the problem
No.
is
So
that
they came in 11th September. So they made changes in Chapter 20. They made changes in the commercial remittance chapter. They made changes in the imports and exports chapter. So it's fairly recent, but
as in 4 days ago.
Yeah.
Right.
I was having a chat with somebody that there has not been a single press release on it. There's no, I mean, randomly one day we were refreshing the website and found out that the State Bank FE manual website pages have been updated. That's it.
Right. Okay. So then that's news for me. I need to go back and then look at some advice that I may have issued like a week ago. But the point being is that the model about how State Bank, provides general permissions is that it likes to list very narrow examples, which is absolutely unsuitable to sort of, innovative areas. I've seen lately people who don't want to necessarily establish a holding company abroad so that they can, hold the shares to their Pakistani operating company. But I've seen established institutions, Pakistani companies who want to invest and open up subsidiaries abroad to undertake some business abroad that may have an impact in investment in Pakistan. And there's no category for that. And so they're surprised, and the idea of going for a special permission for the State Bank with no indicative timelines of how long that could take, that is terrible. That lack of certainty is terrible for business.
So, Uzair, I would like your input since you're aware of the changes that have been made. So I believe that there has been added a category for the subsidiary now. So what is your opinion on this?
No, I have nothing further to add as far as the question that Sami has posed, which is that the process still remains opaque. This is the challenge we have been discussing, right? So,
Yeah.
as a business owner, there is a certain degree of certainty that you want to uh, have when it comes to the decision making of the regulator, and in this case, there isn't any. I also very, very begrudgingly add that there is still a question mark around dividend repatriation, right? So a lot of money has come in. A lot of people have actually invested in Pakistan. A lot of foreign investors, VCs, have invested in Pakistan with the understanding that businesses will be able to repatriate dividends out of Pakistan when that happens. It hasn't happened yet. To be fair, I don't think that question has risen before the State Bank, but considering how complicated the registration process has been, I'm really concerned about the reputation, the reputational damage we will have, the founders will have, companies will have, and the country will have if a dividend is declared by an opco and they're not able to repatriate at the holdco level. Because some procedural compliance hasn't been done, or the State Bank hasn't responded on the questions that have been asked, and so I think as attorneys we've all experienced this thing where you file something with the State Bank, and after 6 months there is a questionnaire of further information that is asked, sometimes which can be repetitive as well, and so I feel that there's still a lot to be desired when it comes to the regulations. The only bright spot I can tell you on this session is that, especially for IT export companies, there has now been a general permission for them to essentially set up subsidiaries outside of Pakistan without authorized dealer being appointed, which was obviously taking a long time. And so that's just a small example. But again, authorized dealer appointment should be a 2-day or 3-day process. It's just paperwork that needs to be filed. Why was it taking months over months, and why now, rather than fixing that problem, we have created a small silo or a tubing where those categories of companies are now exempted from that compliance, but everybody else is. So if you are thinking of building a SaaS company in Pakistan, setting up a holdco outside, you still have to go through that same process. But at the same time, if you're a tech company, you have some exports and you comply with some criteria, then you don't have to register. It's not approval. It has always been a registration, but you don't have to register. So there's a lot to be desired as far as that language is concerned.
But Uzair, Ahmed, just picking up from where you left off, I think we've lost our host again. But even now that the State Bank has sort of allowed this general exemption, my understanding it's in the IT sector, right?
Yep. IT export companies.
And one thing in the especially in the startup sort of area is we don't talk much about promoting or creating an enabling environment for investors.
Yeah.
We expect that foreign VCs, foreign private equity firms will come in, they'll invest in Pakistan, but nobody's talking about setting up PEVC funds in Pakistan. Although, yes, there are a few NBFC licenses here and there, and it's usually your established banks that have opened up asset management companies. But the environment isn't open enough in terms of, tax benefits. There was some tax benefit, and that was removed in 2021 or 2024. And then again, in terms of exactly setting, like I was saying, setting up a, a VC fund in another jurisdiction, Luxembourg, Netherlands, wherever, but allowing Pakistani institutions or Pakistani sort of established investors to perhaps take the opportunity to establish funds abroad simply so they can make investments in Pakistan. So the ultimate benefit is for Pakistan, but you have that hurdle in the state bank regulations as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Recently, even this year, when there was still there has been a lot of push to continue the tax break. The last tax break that was available to LP dividends expired in June this year. That was also that essentially now creates a situation where if you are a local fund with LPs and you invest in a startup in Pakistan, the income is taxed on three occasions. So first, it is taxed at the company level.
Yeah.
Then it is taxed at the fund income level, and then it is taxed again as the LP income level. So it creates a very, very perverse situation that the highest risk investment is probably the taxed highest. But and apparently the government understands it. At least some sectors understand it. So MOITT was calling for submissions around this, and the SECP did as well. And so there has been conversations at least around this, but for now nothing has happened. And finally, on the question of setting up funds outside, it's I think the age-old question remains that the thinking of the state bank is dictated ever since 1999, that it wants to put in place as many guardrails around Pakistani's ability to take money out of Pakistan. And if it doesn't do that, it is going to create a situation where we may run out of dollars. It happened in 99, it has happened. And every time we go into some kind of a balance of payment crisis, or our state bank reserves go down, the immediate reaction is to put up even more guardrails. And so that's just the reality. Taimur bhai, I know you're having some nice snack.
I've been working all hours actually. The last few weeks, आज पहला दिन है back to do some work, and then back into the flood region in Multan and South Punjab. So this is my fruit is my late lunch. Look, I agree with what you've said. मैं सिर्फ ये कहूँगा that another challenge is that it's not that easy to raise funds for startups in Pakistan. So if you're talking about startups, and from a legal perspective, one of the challenges is that when a proper VC or even a institutional angel, let's say, wants to invest, they will do some basic due diligence on the startups. And in most cases, if not not just a few, most cases, startups have not really maintained all their corporate and legal documents, in the right manner. They may have a company registered, but they may not have updated things. They may not have obtained all the relevant licenses. They may not have proper employment contracts or technology service provider contract. They may not have registered their IP rights or trademarks and trade names, and so on. So one thing that I would suggest is that if startups want to be ready for investment or want to prepare a pitch deck and pitch to investors, they should make sure that their basic legal DD documentation at least is in order. In many cases, they don't even have a founders agreement or a shareholders agreement between them in the early days. So I think all that needs to be sorted, because if there are 3 or 4 co-founders and somebody investor is coming in, if there's no agreement in black and white between those co-founders, of course, the investor will feel very reluctant to come in. And all three of us, I think, have advised on issues where co-founders have had differences, or one or more of them have become inactive in the business, and there is then the issue of how the equity will eventually get distributed or not, or so there are various issues of that sort which require attention of startups at an early stage as well, especially if they are looking for external funding. That's something I wanted to highlight.
Taimur bhai, you've talked
But-
about a pet peeve of mine, which is जब मैं किसी founder से पूछता हूँ ना कि आपके equity split क्या, उन्होंने कहा जी हमने 50-50 कर लिया. That's one of my pet peeves.
Okay.
A recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Thank
But,
you so much, Taimur, for your insights. On that note, I would also like to talk about the angel/seed funding and the Series A. So we have Series A, Series B, and then we have angel investment series as well. So I'd like to elaborate on that, and especially the fact that what's the difference between a safe versus a convertible note, and then what do we mean when we say should we do, when founders usually pose the question, should they do post-money safe or a pre-money safe, which is more beneficial to which person?
Sorry, this is for me or somebody else?
Please
Go ahead.
continue.
Please, Ahmed,
Yeah.
you go ahead, please. Sorry. No.
No, please. And I know, Sami, you wanted to say something before.
Sami can go ahead on this.
Yeah.
I'll start with that's quite a big question, Maha. इस पे तो कोई lecture होना चाहिए, but
Let's keep it brief.
I'll try to stick to the basics, based on sort of the people watching. And let's talk about safes, and that's also tied into, at least, like you said, my main focus is disputes. Although as of late, and late in my career, I sort of started doing transactions, and got familiar with all this kind of stuff. But as a disputes lawyer, when this whole sort of startup scene started in Pakistan, and when people in Pakistan started adopting safes, which is essentially a type of an agreement, a simple agreement for future equity that Y Combinator came out with, I felt in my sort of Pakistani lawyer gut that this is going to cause a lot of issues. Now, in most scenarios, they work perfectly fine, where you have angel investors coming in. And, it's a simple agreement that in future, whenever there's going to be a priced round, they're going to get equity and they're putting in their money. But where it gets complicated is when you have a lot of informal arrangements between the angel investor and the founder. Let's say there's some side letter subsequently, or let's say in my recent experience, there's a sweat equity agreement, executed simultaneously with a safe, badly drafted, no proper legal advice. The parties decide to do it themselves. That changes the entire meaning of the safe. There's confusion about, okay, when exactly will the specific, share or stake of the investor vest in him or her? Are they now, typically safes are subject to dilution, unless there's some separate agreement where, and although that rarely happens, but that can be a recipe for a dispute. You adopt a safe, and then suddenly Pakistani founders and Pakistani investors think they either want to tweak it or they want to supplement it with another contract to also allow for some sort of sweat equity arrangement, or some other side letter. So that's something that, I would say startups need to be very mindful of, simply because safes were designed to be an easy agreement to arrange for quick money to, at the seed stage, um, to get things kicked off, doesn't mean that you do everything yourself. So, I mean, that's my input on that. Um, Safe versus convertible notes, Ahmed and Taimur can correct me. Convertible notes obviously is a debt instrument. The founder is supposed to pay interest on it. It has a maturity date. Safes are not that. It's simply a contract for future equity. Yeah, Ahmed, Taimur.
I would also just say that safe notes are becoming a trend in Pakistan as well. Although uh, it is a challenge at times because the regulations are not as clear as they are, let's say, in the US market, where safe notes originated. Uh, the main safe note was created by Y Combinator, and that format with some amendments keeps getting used everywhere. अब मैं पाकिस्तान में the reason that even angel investors are using safe notes now is because not everybody wants to become a registered shareholder in a startup company at an early stage. I mean, if I speak for myself, that's my own preference as well. बिकॉज आप एक दफ़ा अगर रजिस्टर्ड शेयर होल्डर बन जाएं तो आपके ऊपर और किस्म की आप उसमें इन्वॉल्व हो जाते हैं और कल को ज़्यादा इनमें से कई कंपनियां तो वैसे ही बंद हो जाती हैं सो in order to so while there might be some risk, so traditional investor wants a big chunk of equity in a startup company straight away. जो फैमिली ऑफिसेस कुछ इन्वेस्ट पहले करते रहे हैं अभी भी कुछ कर रहे हैं वो काफ़ी ज़्यादा इक्विटी चाहेंगे एंड दे वुड वांट टू कम इन एज अ मेन एंकर सॉर्ट ऑफ एंजल इन्वेस्टर एट एन अर्ली स्टेज बट जो रेगुलर इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं और स्प्रेड करके कर रहे हैं बहुत सारे स्टार्टअप्स में those people don't necessarily want registered equity and also appreciate that founders should not get diluted too much because अगर उनका इंटरेस्ट कम हो जाएगा तो फिर इन्वेस्टर तो टाइम दे नहीं सकता ज़्यादा स्टार्टअप को तो वो कौन चलाएगा
They
so
lose the incentive to build the company.
yes so there has to be a good balance between these things and इसलिए safe notes despite the fact कि अगर कहीं जाके किसी वक्त उसकी एग्जीक्यूशन का इशू पाकिस्तान में आए yeah, how will that work if there a dispute arises? I think despite that, people are signing safe notes with Pakistan-based startups because it also represents ease of investment and from an investor point of view as well, it's quicker to get involved that way. और बाकी चीज़ें एग्रीमेंट्स और सब कुछ वो फिर ऑब्वियसली वंस दे गेट फेमिलियर विद द स्टार्टअप या ज़्यादा बड़ी इन्वेस्टमेंट अगले राउंड में करेंगे प्रॉपर राउंड में तो फिर वो ज़रूर उसको इक्विटी को कंसिडर करते हैं
One thing I'd just like to quickly add, that just popped up in my head. Safes usually will not have, obviously, in the standard format, dispute resolution, as in arbitration clauses, and founders should be mindful of, sort of the jurisdiction, governing law clauses and dispute resolution clauses. At least the ones I've seen, even when they're tailored for, let's say they pick up Y Combinator safe, and they apply it for the Singapore jurisdiction, and Y Combinator has made modified versions which you can for other jurisdictions. But usually founders won't realize that, let's say they have a holdco in another jurisdiction and a dispute arises, then they're stuck in that jurisdiction's courts. So Singapore might be great for having your holdco over there, but it's expensive if it comes to any disputes over there. So thinking about what is an effective and economical dispute resolution mechanism for any disputes that may arise at that stage. Like Taimur said, thinking about enforceability of safes in Pakistan. Although, I mean, the SECP allows for convertible debt securities under the Companies Act. I think Section 66 it can fall, but I don't know whether safes will be recognized under that framework. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts or experience on that.
Well, let's hear Ahmed's views on this as well. मैं तो एक practical view दे रहा हूँ because obviously apart from a lawyer hat, I also have the park launch hat, the investor hat. So, but Ahmed, what do you think and what do you suggest?
No, so like you, I think probably this is also a Stockholm syndrome as well. We've done so many safes. I've ended up signing a lot of checks as using safes myself, and it's sort of it's an unknown beast that became known, and we sort of now understand that the mechanics of it and how it converts, etc. But Sami, I think it's very interesting that you're coming at it from a very different perspective, which is that there is obviously no example of an enforceability question being raised in the courts of law and in Pakistan, and it being addressed and how it may be looked at by the courts of law. So I think there is certainly a degree of question around it. But let me, if you allow, take a little bit of a step back around this, and whenever I look at safes and you know, the ecosystem in which this document is accepted, it's very different from a traditional business transaction in Pakistan. As an angel, if I have a dispute with my investee, I've already lost the battle. It's as an early stage investor, if I've put money in a business and it has reached a point where I need to go to court for the enforcement, it has probably it's well beyond repairable damage. It's well beyond repairable, and so it just feels that in most occasions, angel investors or early stage investors are willing to write off their dispute or disagreements or issues that they may have with founders as opposed to going to court over it. I will also say one more thing on this, that from the the heydays of 2021, where there was a safe being signed by a startup in Pakistan every other week, the volume of transaction has decreased, and as a percentage, safe as a tool for investment vehicle has also reduced. So it used to be that a vast majority of multi-million-dollar checks were being signed using safes. And now, if somebody is putting in a significant amount of money, they would want to do it in some other format, like, for example, a convertible note, like, for example, an equity round. And so I feel that there is a certain amount of acknowledgement from the investors' side as well, that they need better protections, better better board controls. For example, a lot of the early seed investments that happened in Pakistan, there were simply no corporate governance at all, and as a result, there were some bad experiences for investors as well. And so I think there has been a degree of institutional learning around it, and I don't think we will see another example of people signing $1.5 million checks on safe anymore. I think that those days are well in the past and behind us.
That is a very interesting take. Taimur, would you like to add to this? What is your opinion on the fact
Your voice is breaking up.
Okay, so I was saying that that's a very interesting take that Uzair has. So what's your take on the fact that Uzair thinks there's no more fish to be had in the Pakistani market, especially in the coming years, considering that Pakistan is moving towards reforming the company law and the general regulatory framework around it?
देखिए, मेरे ख्याल में पाकिस्तान में अभी तो काफ़ी कुछ होने वाला है। पाकिस्तान, आई डोंट नो हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू आर monitoring the flood situation at the moment, but tens of millions of people across Pakistan are impacted this year now, right? So जॉब स्कार्सिटी पहले ही बहुत है पाकिस्तान में। वी नीड टू क्रिएट entrepreneurs। और एक चीज़ जो अच्छी करते हैं स्टार्टअप्स, और मैं अक्सर ये कहता हूँ कि ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आपका स्टार्टअप यूनिकॉर्न बने, $1 billion या $100 million कंपनी बने, हज़ारों लोगों को एम्प्लॉय करे। इनफैक्ट कई जो बड़े टेक स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो तो ज़्यादा लोग एम्प्लॉय भी नहीं करते, राइट? सो एक मेरी नज़र में तो जो एक स्टार्टअप चंद लाख डॉलर का बिजनेस कर रहा है, लेकिन 100 लोग एम्प्लॉय किए हुए हैं, तो उनकी बहुत बड़ी कंट्रीब्यूशन है। और इस तरह के सैकड़ों नहीं, शायद हज़ारों हैं अक्रॉस पाकिस्तान। तो मैं उसको इनकरेज करूँ। सबसे पहली चीज़ तो ये है कि आप सिर्फ वो बड़ी सक्सेस स्टोरीज को चेज ना करें। एक छोटा बिजनेस जो है, स्टार्टअप, जो अपने लिए, अपने फाउंडर्स के लिए एक जरिया माश दे रहा है और साथ साथ एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट कर रहा है लोगों के लिए, आई थिंक एज अ ग्रेट कंट्रीब्यूशन टू द सोसाइटी एंड टू देमसेल्व्स। So, regardless of how things are, of course, we want things to improve. Investment enablement to become easier. लेकिन उसके साथ साथ NICs जो पूरे पाकिस्तान में कर रहे हैं अब तकरीबन, आई थिंक AGC रिकग्नाइज जितनी यूनिवर्सिटीज़ हैं, दे मैंडेटेड टू हैव इंक्यूबेशन सेंटर्स या किसी किस्म का एक्सीलरेटर्स या कुछ सेटअप एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप रिलेटेड, स्टार्टअप रिलेटेड। तो ये ट्रेंड बढ़ रहा है और हमें इसके अंदर ईज ऑफ बिजनेस इंप्रूव करनी है, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इन्फोर्समेंट इंप्रूव करनी है, रेगुलेशन कम करनी है, राइट? सो जितने लॉस कम हों इन चीज़ों से डील करने के लिए, उतना ही बेहतर है। जैसे अहमद ने शुरू में बात की कि आपको इतने मुख्तलिफ दफातर में जाके अगर लाइसेंस और अप्रूवल्स और बिजनेस को चलाने के लिए रजिस्ट्रेशन करानी पड़ेंगी तो मुश्किलात आती हैं। सो आई वुड जस्ट इनकरेज, and at the same time, since we are three lawyers on this session, say कि अपनी बेसिक लीगल रिक्वायरमेंट्स को फुलफिल करें और फिर आगे देखें। हम राइड हेलिंग कंपनीज, मैं नाम नहीं लेता, लेकिन बड़ी राइड हेलिंग कंपनीज जो हैं, अगर उनकी एग्जांपल लें, उनकी अप्रोच यही थी कि हर मार्केट में घुस जाते थे कि बाद में पता चलेगा कि रेगुलेशन क्या है और सब कुछ क्या है, लेकिन उनको बाद में टेंस ऑफ मिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स के उन जुरिस्डिक्शन में फाइन भी हुए, राइट? सो जो उन्होंने पे किए और उस वक्त तक वो फंडिंग और तरह रेस कर चुके थे, मार्केट शेयर कैप्चर कर चुके थे। सो डिफरेंट अप्रोच है, कोई एक चीज़ नहीं है, बट यू नीड टू कंसिडर दीज थिंग्स विद योर लॉयर। यू नीड टू हैव अ लॉयर। ये नहीं हो सकता कि आपने स्टार्टअप शुरू कर लिया है, आपका बिजनेस भी शुरू हो गया है, सब कुछ है, स्टाफ भी है, और आपने आज तक कभी लॉयर के दफ्तर का रास्ता ही नहीं देखा या किसी लॉयर को कंसल्ट ही नहीं किया। सो दैट यू कांट डू। आई मीन, इफ यू नॉट वेल, यू गो टू अ डॉक्टर। If you want to open a bank account, you interact with the banking institution or now digital banks या fintechs। तो जब आप कोई भी बिजनेस, चाहे जितना छोटा भी हो, जब शुरू करते हैं और उसके लिए जो आपकी लीगल रिक्वायरमेंट्स हैं उसको आपने देख के चलना है, आपके कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स को भी और बाकी चीज़ों को, तो ज़रूर लॉयर यूज़ करें। मैं ये नहीं कहूँगा कि महंगे से महंगा वकील यूज़ करें, एक किसी यंग वकील को भी यूज़ कर लें जिसका थोड़ा सा एक्सपीरियंस हो, कुछ समझें। एंड देन एज यू ग्रो यू कैन ऑफ कोर्स सी कि आपको मज़ीद क्या ज़रूरत है और किस तरह के की लीगल इनपुट की ज़रूरत है। बट डू टेक सम एडवाइस। On that note, I don't know if you can hear me, but because मैंने
Yes, I can.
एक और commitment है मेरी in a few minutes, so I'll drop off. Ahmed and
Thank you so much.
Sami-Ud-Din,
I
great to
think
do
we'll
this with
wrap
you.
this up as well. Yes, we'll wrap this up as well, considering I apologize for the internet connectivity issues that we have had today. You guys have been really good sportsmen, unlike Pakistan, India yesterday. So thank you so much for your cooperation today. I apologize for any inconvenience that you guys had.
No,
Taimur,
no
thank you
worries.
so much. you can drop out. Uzair and Sami, I would like some final comments from you, especially Sami. I was really interested from your perspective that you were thinking of the end before the beginning, that many startups are using wrong jurisdictions for their dispute resolutions. So would you just give final comments about that? And Uzair, if you could just wrap this up and give your thoughts as well. So this would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, so my view is ultimately for startups and founders is not that there's any wrong jurisdiction. Absolutely, founders should take advice as to what is the most suitable jurisdiction where they should have their holdcos, whether they even need a holdco. I mean, if you can raise the money all on your own in Pakistan, do it yourself without any investors, isn't that the best? Startups isn't about just coming up with an idea just so that you can raise money. Startups is about raising or creating the business, creating value. And then if there's a need to sort of expand, to look for investors. And the ultimate point is that once you have that business structure in place, when you are raising money, inviting investors, whatever arrangement or contracts you enter into, you should think about all the sort of points at each end of the spectrum. So, on one end, you're thinking, it's going to be a honeymoon between you and the investor. On the other end, prepare for a really sort of dangerous storm. Yes, it's possible that if there's a dispute, some investors will just write it off and not bother. But ultimately, you want to avoid disputes. You want to avoid the hassle. If it's not a major claim, there may be litigation expenses. If it's not that, it's just your time being taken away from the business that you can grow. So it's about looking at everything on all sides of the spectrum. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Sami, it's been a pleasure meeting you for the first
Very well
time.
said.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, I don't think I have a lot to add. I just want to conclude on a positive note and say that I believe that we are still at the very early stage of a tech revolution that's happening in Pakistan. The number of universities we have, the number of people we have getting into universities, and then now talking about entrepreneurship so openly compared to 20 years ago when I was in university is light and day. And so I'm quite hopeful that this ecosystem is going to continue to thrive and grow, and can't wait to play my part in it.
Great. Thank you so much. And I would just like to say in the last comments that, again, this is being broadcasted live on YouTube. I think the link would be provided to you. And thank you again so much for today. And I hope you have a lovely day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Maha.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Sami.
Ahmed.
Thank you.